Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this 1-hour panel. Today we have gathered in order to talk about human rights in Bahrain, and especially like the most recent developments, especially the issue of the visa revocation of members from Human Rights Watch during the Interparliamentary Union Assembly, during which the Bahraini government has revoked the visas of 2 members from Human Rights Watch, and especially wanted to raise the issues of the whitewashing of the Al Khalifa dynasty in Bahrain through hosting of sports events, and especially the issue of political prisoners and some of the most notable persons who are also known as the Bahrain 13, who were incarcerated and subsequently tortured during the Bahraini uprising in 2011, which are Abdelhadi al-Khawaja, for example, Dr. Hassan Mushema, and also other notable people and Shia clerics. For example, also Dr. Abdel Jalil al-Singes. Those people are still incarcerated. Those people have been tortured severely in prison, and lots of attention has been raised from international human rights organizations, such as, for example, Amnesty International, who has designated all of these people prisoners of conscience. So today we gathered in order to talk about this issue, like the two especially like the focus that I have raised on the issue of political prisoners and the whitewashing. So I would first of all like to hand over the mic to Dr. Saeed Shihabi, who is a London-based human rights defender and also a member of the Bahraini Freedom Movement. So if you would like to give us a short introduction about the human rights in Bahrain and the latest developments and what the international human rights organizations can do in order to promote the amelioration of the human rights situation in Bahrain, I would be very thankful. So the mic goes to you, Dr. Saeed Shihabi.
Thank you very much, Dara. Thank you, everybody who is here. Good afternoon to you. It's a pleasure to address you all, knowing that probably some of you are more knowledgeable, although I am from the country, but some of you must have compiled a reasonable dossier about the human rights situation in Bahrain. I have followed those rights and the situation of the human rights for many years. I still remember a Human Rights Watch report that was issued in 1997, I think. It was called, at the time, routine abuse, routine denial. So there is routine abuse, the routine is continuing, but there is also with it routine and continuous denial by the regime. This is the situation. They do not call it human rights. They do not call the process of the people's uprising and demands as legitimate cause, but they are crimes. They are crimes, and also sometimes they call them terrorists. So the definition of crime, the definition of terrorism is totally different from what is commonly expected and understood. A crime is to stand up against the regime. Terrorism is to call for your rights, and so on and so forth. So, and also, there is nobody called the prisoner of conscience. He's a criminal. So a person like Abdul Hadi al-Khawaja is a criminal. He's not a human, a prisoner. He is not a prisoner of conscience. He is simply a criminal. Why? Because he stood up for the rights of the people, because he challenged the authority of the tribal leadership on the way they handled the situation. They have been handling the situation for the past 100 years almost. I can go back to the start of the anti-regime movement back to 1922. And of course, this what I'm saying is supported by the British Foreign Office documents, because I did write a book on the history of Bahrain between 1920 and 1971 in those 50 years. But they were largely taken from the British, the UK's Foreign Office documentation. So I am well aware of what was going on behind bars. I remember I still have somewhere here a letter that was smuggled out of prison in 1974 by a group of people, many of whom have now passed away, but some of them are still alive. And that letter, if I told you that it has come last week from prison, you would say it's the same. It's just, yes, it could be. It could have come only last week from prison, not in 1974. So the situation has been stagnant. In fact, it has been going from bad to worse, simply because there are no mechanisms in the world to slap the human right violator on his, at least on his hand. They can still do business with the violators of rights, with torturers, with executioners. They are still doing business as usual with the Khalifa dictators. And everything is fine. It's normal to have a regime that is hereditary, whereby the king becomes king simply because he is the son of a king. So if the father dies, the son will take over and he will become a king. And then it's not an honorary position, it is an executive position. It is a government position. And that king will appoint all the ministers, and the ministers will do what he wants. Today, earlier, there was a member of the Shura Council, Jamal Fakhro, who was simply refuting the calls to release Abdul Hadi al-Khawaja. He said this is intervention in the internal affairs of Bahrain. After 12 years incarceration, Abdul Hadi al-Khawaja remains a prisoner of conscience in accordance to the international codes and concepts. But to the Bahrainis, he still remains a criminal that who must be locked behind bars for life. And so is Dr. Abdul Jalil Singhes, who has been on hunger strike for the past probably 620, 630 days. And he has transformed into a skeleton. And he is still using his crutches to go to toilet, to move around. And he is in solitary confinement. Him and Mr. Hassan Mshema, they are both held at what is called Kano Health Center, but they are in separate rooms and they are not able to meet anyone else, to mix with any other. They are just on their own, separate from each other. They have not spoken even once to each other. And to Jamal Fakhro and others, that's fine. To look up now more than 1,000 people, 1,500 people for the past 12 years for calling for rights. Since this time in 2011, 12 full years without being able to come out of that incarceration. Now, human rights, Bahrain has become a black hole for human rights. It is just a place where human rights will continue to degenerate year by year, decade by decade, and there is no light at the end of the tunnel to escape that eventually that black hole. So unfortunately, the situation is likely to continue, and unless there is real deterrence from the international community. And I am glad that we have people here who are of good political caliber, like Senator Gerard Craughwell, and of course, our friends from Human Rights Watch, whose visas have been cancelled were cancelled last week, and they were not allowed to enter into the country. Yet, the international, the IPU, the International Parliamentary Union, has not even found a reason to issue a condemnation for the cancellation of those visas. So it is unfortunate that the world powers are putting themselves in the same position as the leaders of Bahrain, who continue to violate human rights. So there is plenty to be said about that subject, But at the end of the day, unless there is a political change, human rights will remain violated, will continue to be violated, and it is impossible to improve the human rights under dictatorial regimes. Thank you, everybody, and let us spend the next 40 minutes or 45 minutes together listening to what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saeed Shihabi, for this summary about the current human rights situation in Bahrain, and also particularly for highlighting that the situation hasn't changed, that even has become worse. And maybe just to add on that, like, for example, as I mentioned before, is that the Bahraini government deliberately tries to whitewash these human rights violations by, for example, hosting sports events. Or what even they did in the last period was, for example, to also issue conditional release for prisoners, such as the case for Mr. Hassan Mushamer. In fact, I met his son Ali Mushamer, who also lives in London, some weeks ago, and we also talked about the situation of his father in the parliament and tried to raise this concern. And there was also the big issue of the Bahraini government trying to offer conditional release for prisoners, which is actually not a real release, because there are many conditions and really harsh stipulations for them not to be allowed to talk about human rights ever, not to be allowed to be politically active again, and with the constant risk of being rearrested again. So this is also those are deliberate attempts by the Bahraini government to further conceal these human rights violations that have been ongoing, and which were very much, very greatly summarized by Dr. Saeed Shihabi. So thank you very much. I would like to give the mic to Wolfgang Büttner from Human Rights Watch in Germany. Maybe you could highlight a little bit on the events that we have just mentioned about the visa revocation for members from Human Rights Watch by the Bahraini government, and also talk about in general about the work from Human Rights Watch regarding human rights violations in Bahrain.
Yes, so can you hear me quite well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation and for setting this up. It's for us in Germany. So I'm in the Berlin office of Human Rights Watch. I was very much involved on Nabil Rajab when he was still in prison. And so we really pushed this issue with the German government, in particular also with the Human Rights Commissioner in Berlin, to get him released. I mean, this was, of course, with many other human rights activists and officers. And I mean, in a way, this is a sign of hope that political pressure works, as he finally was released. But of course, many other are still in prison, and we have to continue our work and to continue pushing also the German government to put human rights in Bahrain higher on the agenda. And that's something which we do. We recently had a meeting with the Foreign Office on the death sentences and unfair trials. So really in touch with them here in Berlin also, and to give this topic higher priority. Now, on the recent events in Manama, I mean, I see that Nico, my colleague from our MENA division from Human Rights Watch, is also on the call, and she was one of those two people whose visa was revoked when they wanted to enter Bahrain for the Interparliamentary Union Assembly. For us, really, of course, it's a hypocrisy. I mean, on the one hand, this interparliamentary union calls for democracy for everyone. And on the other hand, they don't let Human Rights Watch, independent human rights organizations into the country. Although we have a permanent observer status, and this clearly is a violation of the IPU statutes. But maybe Nico, would you like to maybe directly, if you would like to add something, your personal experience, how this visa were revoked and what this meant to you? Maybe this would be helpful.
Sure, thank you, and apologies for the poor lighting right now. Yeah, thanks so much, Wolfgang, for allowing me a chance to speak on this. We did have our visas revoked last week prior to attending, which honestly came as a great surprise, mainly because we have permanent observer status. We didn't expect Bahrain to give us any visas otherwise, because they haven't allowed any Human Rights Watch staff into the country since 2012. However, considering that they have chosen to engage in an event like this, where they are, actively deciding to host people from around the world and engage in this form of international global order, where they allow things like permanent observer status and members of that to be entering their country, they really did have an obligation to let us in, and ultimately they did give us the visas. I think what it ultimately did do, however, is demonstrate what a whitewashing event it was when they did choose to rescind our visas last week. I think there was no denying for any of us on this call that they have extensive human rights abuses. Ultimately, they're hosting a conference of parliamentarians when there's former parliamentarians in their prison system who have been tortured and have been kept there for many years, and they've stripped citizenship of many other former parliamentarians. And so I think ultimately the fact that they did revoke our visas gave us an opportunity to really once again demonstrate the ironies of the fact that this event was happening in their country, and gave us a chance to highlight to the rest of the world what was happening and how terrible it is that a country like Bahrain would be a host to an event that's supposed to be bringing together parliamentarians in this, quote unquote, inclusive way when that's absolutely not the case in the country. Thanks.
Yeah, I thank you, Nico, for this firsthand reporting. I think, and as it was also already mentioned by Saeed Shihabi, it shows the mounting repression, I think, which the human rights defenders in the country experience in the last years. And this is which our researchers have again and again documented. I mean, whether it's freedom of expression, also the arrest of the 4 men shortly ahead of the IPU meeting also shows again that freedom of expression has no value in Bahrain, as they were arrested because of a tweet. One, as you know, was criticizing or was asking for reforming the parliament. You document again and again that freedom of association does not exist. We have the political isolation law, about which we did a long report a few months ago, in which we saw that political activists are really kept away from political activism, from taking parts in elections. We had this report about the death penalty and the unfair trials, which we also raised here in Germany with the government, which we did together with the Bahrain Institute for Rights and Democracy. And of course, we always point also to the use of spyware by the Bahraini government. I think maybe about which Saeed Shihabi can speak a little bit more in addition. Because this is also a very concerning issue for us, of course, which many governments around the world, autocratic governments around the world use, but also Bahrain, and it's very, very concerning development which we could document. And of course, we press, as you all, as many others, for the release of Abdullah al-Khawaja and many other human rights defenders who are still imprisoned in Bahrain. Maybe one final point. As Nico said, I also think it was a good opportunity for MPs who traveled to Manama for the IPU meeting to raise human rights issues. And in a way, really, it was used by many MPs. And I think Senator Craughwell will also pick this up and speak about this more in depth. So I was also in touch with German MPs. And they also apparently raised it. I think not publicly, but they wanted to raise it with the IPU. And so there was at least some impact, I think, with regard to human rights. And it shows in a way our experience with Nabil Rajab shows in a way that political pressure really can make a difference for the people who are sitting in the prisons. And so we have to keep this up and continue our political work and pressure the Bahraini government. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the information and for the insight, and also on highlighting and explaining what has happened exactly, like regarding the incident of the visa revocation. So thank you, both of you, very much from Human Rights Watch. As you have mentioned, our next speaker now, I would like to give the mic to him, to Senator Craughwell. Maybe you could emphasize and highlight a little bit about bilateral relations between Bahrain and Ireland, and also, if I'm not mistaken, you have been very much advocating for promoting human rights in Bahrain. You have also called many times for the release of political prisoner Abdelhadi al-Khawaja. So maybe you could also highlight a little bit on that point, and I would give the mic to you then.
Dear friends, thank you for having me here this evening. In some ways, I feel a bit of a fraud because truly, I'm a national politician in Ireland who concentrates on such things as public procurement, defence, cyber security, and I suppose you could accuse me justifiably of being inward looking with respect to my country and with respect to everything that bothers my country. But I and others have become more and more aware of the intolerant regimes that are beginning to emerge all over the world, not just in Bahrain, but everywhere. And these intolerant regimes, they exist based on fear. And the most ridiculous type of fear I can think about is fear of language, fear of voice, fear of speaking, people speaking out. And prior to traveling to Bahrain, I had been contacted by the frontline defenders here in Ireland and asked if I would raise the issues in relation to human rights in Bahrain. And I took on board what they said. For those who know me, I'm fairly prolific on social media, so I do a lot of tweeting, a lot of Facebook, Instagram. It's part of a politician's life. That's what we do. But I'm here, and the real people we should be honouring this evening are our Danish colleagues and our Norwegian colleagues who left no stone unturned in Bahrain in the recent IPU conference. I was moved by the Norwegian lady, so much so that I wanted to capture what she said on video. And by the time I managed to get everything together, she was gone. And that was immediately followed by our colleagues from Denmark. I want to, if I can, just put in context with a short statement that I've prepared. It's quite similar to something I provided to the Middle East Eye news media, but I just want to make sure my thoughts come across as I intend them. So, the IPU, I've had the honour of being selected by my government on 2 occasions to attend an IPU conference. And I have to say that when I arrived in Bahrain, the venue, the hotel, everything you could expect was at a level of excellence that you could only expect from a country that is as wealthy as Bahrain. However, what was rather odd was that the conference had a most noble theme of promoting peaceful coexistence and inclusive society, fighting intolerance, in a country with a regime that does not understand the concept of peaceful coexistence, and judging by their reaction to alternative voices, are very high on the list of intolerant societies. When the IPU selected Bahrain, they provided a truly wonderful and unique opportunity for parliamentarians from around the world to call out the Bahrainis for the abuses that they beat out on human rights. Before leaving for the IPU, I had been contacted by frontline defenders here in Dublin. They outlined to me and my colleague delegates the serious human rights abuses taking place in Bahrain on a daily basis. As such, it would have been wrong of me to ignore their concerns and leave Bahrain without commenting. I believe that a comment from inside Bahrain in the relative safety, and I'll come back to this in a moment, in the relative safety of the IPU conference would have a significant impact in the Middle East, particularly, but all over the world. And for that reason, I spoke out. We know that members of the Bahraini political opposition, as well as activists, bloggers, and human rights defenders, continue to be imprisoned for their roles in the 2011 pro-democracy protests, as well as for more recent political activism. We saw how sharing a simple news story before the IPU conference resulted in Ibrahim al-Mani, him and some of his colleagues being arrested for something as absolutely outrageous as the being prejudicial to good order. When I speak about parliamentarians and indeed alternative voices, if that were a criteria to lock people up, I should have been locked up 9 years ago and should be locked up every day since then, because I forever call my government out and call out the things that I believe they do wrong within our society, and that we need that for a good, healthy society. A tolerant and democratic nation always has a place for the alternative voice. No matter how far right or how far left that alternative voice is, it must be heard, because that's what keeps the rest of us honest. We understand that political prisoners face brutal treatments in Bahrain, including torture, denial of medical care, etc. This is the worst form of human rights abuse, to deny people medical treatment when they need it. I'm aware of a call from colleagues in the European Union asking for the release of those who were detained and sentenced merely for exercising their right to freedom of expression. I want to add my voice to this. The government of Bahrain must release those jailed opposition activists who have not been charged with any international recognizable crime. I call on the government of Bahrain to implement long-standing UN recommendations and rescind Bahrain's political isolation laws, which include arbitrary bans on opposition parties, civil society groups, and independent media to encourage the development of civic space in Bahrain. One of the interesting things during the IPU was one of my colleague states asked to visit the parliament in Bahrain, and they visited. And a young and rather naive member of that delegation asked those showing her around the parliament building, which side is opposition and which side is government in the parliamentary building? And it was met with stony silence and sort of a palpable level of panic in silence. And after a few moments, somebody emerged and said, well, the government run the country and everybody who sits in parliament is the opposition, which is a very interesting concept on how you get an opposition. You put all the people you like in the seats and you tell them, no, you're the opposition. So, I mean, the government of Bahrain must ensure that the freedom of expression has got to exist in Bahrain. It's got to be. There are many other countries, and there are many. We spent some time ourselves talking about the Bernard Phelan case with the Iranian delegation while in Bahrain, and it was. We'll see whether it will bear fruit or not. I'm not sure. Again, the use of torture and ill treatment. This is totally at odds with the United Nations, and I'll come back to the United Nations in just a second. The government of Bahrain must implement an immediate moratorium on the use of the death penalty, which is the most horrendous form of punishment to be meted out. It's bad enough if you have a cold case where you can actually guarantee you saw somebody committing murder, but the use of the death penalty in parts of the Middle East is almost a throwaway sentence, which is really, really frightening. What I'm asking for today, and what I will continue to ask for through our own government, is that Bahrain establish an independent and impartial commission of inquiry, which has no association with our hierarchical relationship with the Public Prosecutor's Office, or the Ministry, or the royal family in any way. They must be independent, and the only way we can get independent is people from outside Bahrain to go in there and see what it is. Finally, and I'll come back to the other two issues in a moment, but finally in this statement, I want to say a number of people have had their citizenship taken from them. I have never heard of anything like this in my life. And for the life of me, can't understand how anybody would do such a thing. And what I want to say is, I want to say that Bahrain must reinstate those citizenships immediately. Now, Laura, you introduced me as somebody with a great feel for human rights. I wish I could hold a candle to any one of you on this Zoom today. I would be a complete fraud when it comes to it. But as I said, I use social media quite a lot. And I was approached by Mr. Jamal Mohammed Fakhro, first deputy chairman of the Shura Council. Does that make sense to you people? His card is here. Oops. Ooh.
Nice card.
Okay, it's lovely, very good quality, actually. And he asked me if I was enjoying the conference. I said I was. Somehow or other, the discussion came around to my Twitter account, and he made the point that my tweets were very negative. And he asked me, was there anything positive that I could tweet about the IPU in Bahrain? And I said I could, and I did shortly afterwards. I said the venue was wonderful, the building was wonderful, and the hotel was wonderful, and I wasn't lying in any of that. However, it was the last sentence in our conversation that left me thinking, and I discussed it with some colleagues from different parliaments, and they all came to the same conclusion I came to. He said to me, of course, Senator, while you're here in this building, you may tweet and say anything you wish. And it was the "in this building" part of that sentence that gave me rise for concern. Some of my own colleagues from Ireland suggested I may languish in a prison cell before I leave the country if I spoke outside. So, the United Nations. We talk about the United Nations and we talk about the United Nations Security Council. With what's going on in Bahrain and in other parts of the Middle East, why do we tolerate relationships of any sort with these countries? Why, you asked about bilateral relations with Bahrain. We had a similar situation with an executive of an Irish company going to China and being locked and retained in China for 2 years. He was allowed to walk around, but he was not allowed an exit visa because there had been some fraud in the company that he was an executive of. And I worked for 2.5 years on that case with his wife and his children. It was the most brutal form of restriction that one can think of. He wasn't put in jail, but he was prevented from coming home. And the question I asked our Department of Foreign Affairs in Ireland is, how many tons of beef is a human life worth? And I regret to say to you people, and I feel deeply humbled here with you, I regret to say to you people, far too many of our economies throughout the world are prepared to sacrifice human rights in order to sell a pound of beef or a pound of sugar or a pound of something else. We tolerate these extremely wealthy countries because of their buying power, and we take our eye off the human rights issues. And when I see our friends from Human Rights Watch who had visas to attend, and you would have been so welcome at the IPU, it would have been so wonderful after hearing the Norwegians and the Danes speak, to have been able to go to a stand where you would have been and to speak to you personally. That would have been just so wonderful. But I guess freedom of speech is not something the Bahrainis were willing to allow, even within the IPU building. So where do we go from here? I will certainly be making statements in our own parliament, and other members of our delegation will make statements, I'm sure. How do we reform Bahrain? I believe the only way to reform the Bahrains of this world, and there are more than Bahrain in the Middle East, and not just the Middle East, I believe that trade cannot be the price of a denial of human rights. And unfortunately, economies, governments are prepared to sell out anything in order to keep their economies going. And that includes my own. I'm sorry to say. We are prepared to turn a blind eye to certain issues. Why did it take 2.5 years to get Richard O'Halloran out of China? Why are we in a situation where Bernard Phelan is in Iran and we can't get him out? Why aren't we more vocal? Why aren't we more determined? Sadly, I look at you people who dedicate your lives to human rights, and I wish I had your courage. I wish I was able to be a fraction of what you people are. All I can say to you is, God gave me the opportunity to use my voice in a place where it can be heard from time to time, and I will continue to do that on your behalf. I hope I haven't gone on too long. Thank you very much indeed, Laura.
Thank you so much. No, you haven't talked so long. Actually, we really appreciate your commitment and the statement that you have made. And thank you so much also at the end for highlighting that states, like this sad reality that states unfortunately do prioritize geopolitical interests at the expense of human rights. I think this is a sad reality that we unfortunately also have to emphasize if we talk in this broader framework about general human rights protection, and in particular in this session about human rights protection and human rights issues in Bahrain. And from this point of view, I would now really much like to give the mic to a friend and acquaintance of mine also, whom I had the opportunity to meet some weeks ago in order to talk about the issue of his imprisoned father, the son of imprisoned human rights defender and oppositional politician Hassan Mushema, who was also with us, Ali Mushema from London. Together with him, I had a meeting with the German MP, and he also met the German foreign ministry. So I would like to give the mic to Ali to talk about, in general, about those meetings, and also to give us some updates and highlight the issues of political prisoners. And since you are kind of personally affected also, especially about your father, the incarcerated politician, Hassan Mushema.
Thank you, Lara. Sorry to interrupt.
You can interrupt, no problem. You can interrupt.
Is there a possibility that we request everyone just to give us a good pose by a camera so that we can take at least one shot?
Yeah, we can.
You need to go back a little bit, Lara, because half of your head is not appearing.
Okay.
And the senator, if he can kindly lower the telephone so that we see more of him, if that's possible. And also, Nico, if you can little bit take, I don't know, raise the so that you are, yes, because Lara, now just Lara. And what about Hassan Hudayat, Dr. Ayn Faraj? Can you please show us your faces just for 1 second? Lara, can you go back a little bit? Because your half of your head is not appearing. The top like half that? Of your head.
Like that? It's better?
More, just go back a little bit.
Okay, because I'm sitting right now, so I have to remove the laptop Ali, like this.
I'll just take one shot and then you are... Hassan Hudayat, you are not with us? Okay, I will just take one screenshot. Okay, stop, Ali, you are moving too much. Okay, thank you very much. Now you can take your legend.
Then thank you.
Thank you.
So afterwards, then now we can continue with Ali. I will give the mic to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lara. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be with you. I just joined and I wasn't prepared to talk, but anyway, as you know, and you may be mentioned that tomorrow will be the 12th anniversary of arresting my father and other political prisoners. It's really hard, it's not easy. When I'm talking about my dad, I can feel him, and I can feel the other political prisoners. I was in prison several times, and first time when I was 15 years old, I was tortured at that time. I still remember all the details. I cannot forget the details, not only the story. So now my father, he's 75 years old, suffering from different health disease. and he's in solitary confinement now for more than 1 year and a half. They transfer him from the prison, Joe prison, the very known Joe prison, where they hold the other political prisoners and the human rights defenders like Abdel Khwaja and others. For what they said, they said they want to look after his health and give him proper medical treatment. This was on July 2021. We find out 2 months later, two senior officers went to my father and offered him a conditional release. And the conditions was to be silent, first one, and not involved to any political activities or issue any political statements. And the second condition is not receiving like huge people, too many people. You can have some like 3, 4, 5 guests at your home, but not more than 10 people at your home. Of course, my father refused the offer at that time, and he said it very clearly that I'm not going to sell my my very long journey fighting for the basic rights for my people and for myself. So I believe in democracy, I believe in human rights, I believe that my freedom is my right. So now you're taking me and putting me in prison for 10 years. And my father was severely tortured. Then after 10 years, the authority came with this offer, and they wanted to make the offer, it's like big offer, like they give the offer, they give the freedom, they give the life, the right for life to people. So because my father refused this offer, they keep him in solitary confinement. The solitary confinement in medical facility center. So they put him in Kano medical center, supposed to be a hospital, where he not getting the proper medical treatment that he needed. So they denied the medical treatment inside the medical facility center. The other political figures, prisoners, who I think you know very well about Mr. Abdel Khwaja, his situation, that they take him to the A&E 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, and his health now is deteriorating and is not stable. As well, Sheikh Abdel Jalil al-Muqdad, who is an old scholar, very known, his age, I think nearly 70 now. So he's suffering from a very pain in his head and in his leg for now more than 10 years, and they don't give him the treatment that he needs. So I feel there is the government of Bahrain is not only arresting the opposition, they treat them like as a revenge. So there is a revenge from the government because they stood up one day against the corruption, because they demand for human rights, for democracy. So now the government is revenge because they talk, because they stood up. They want to take their will, what they believe, like they think. This is not easy, as I mentioned. And when I'm talking about my dad in his age, in his conditions, to be honest, I don't know how long he will survive behind the bar. For someone who is in his age and who like spent 12 years now behind the bar. Of course, when I hear some brave voice like senator from Ireland and other member of parliament, when we hear the Danish MPs and from Norway and from other countries, the MPs who spoke out inside Bahrain and mentioned the political prisoners, figures like Abdelhadi al-Khwaja and others, this gives us hope, and we feel sometimes like you are the voice for the voiceless. So I want to thank you, and I want to ask you to keep mention these cases and raise the demand for releasing them immediately, and not accept just watching that the Western government making a good and strong relationship economically and politically with the Bahrain without conditions. And I think that there must be a conditions which is respecting human rights in general. I will just end by greeting Mr. Ibrahim Demistani as well. We remembered his son 2 days ago, Ali, who was killed by the Bahraini police 12 years ago when they by police car 12 years ago when he participated protest close to the rubber roundabout in 2011. And yeah, I will stop here, and thank you for giving me this opportunity, Laura.
Thank you very much for your statement. I think you have mentioned all the important points, all the important information that were crucial on this matter. So thank you very much. I would now like to give the mic to our last speaker, who is, just let me check if he is currently with us. Yes, Oscar Stevens, right? From the Free Abdelhadi al-Khawaja movement. So maybe you could also shortly highlight on your position about the movement in general and give us a bit some overview, especially since you have been active in this campaign about the situation, because there have been lately some updates on the situation of political prisoner Abdelhadi al-Khawaja. So I would like to give the mic to you.
Thank you, Laura, and good evening to all of you. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. My name is Oscar Stevens. I'm based here in Copenhagen, and I'm the campaign lead for the Free Al-Khawaja campaign. Thank you, Laura, for facilitating this virtual symposium on human rights in Bahrain, and thank you for the brilliant speakers we've heard. Thank you. I must, thank you for your support on not only Al-Khawaja's case, but on human rights in Bahrain generally, and on all political prisoners who are unjustly detained in Bahrain, and especially Ali, thank you for your courageous work and your speech. It was really moving to hear. I am, I'm based also in Copenhagen, a very safe place, and I work with Mariam and Zainab and the family of Abdelhadi al-Khawaja, and I will just give you a brief update on, the situation right now and our campaign and advocacy work, trying to get al-Khawaja released and also put pressure on the Bahraini government in improving human rights conditions and freeing detained political prisoners. So first of all, it should be noted that in the last couple of weeks, we've been greatly concerned with Al-Khawaja's health situation. On the 28th of February, he was taken to an emergency hospital, the BDF hospital, as some of you might know, run by the military, where Abdulhadi has been tortured 2 times before. But he was taken to this emergency hospital due to an urgent heart issue, and subsequently he was denied access to a cardiologist. So the Bahrain regime has put out a public statement claiming that Al-Khawaja has been given an appointment with a cardiologist on the 19th of March, so in 3 days' time. It should be noted that neither Al-Khawaja himself, nor his family, nor the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been informed of this appointment. So of course there's some concern about whether he, first of all, will get his appointment with the cardiologist, and second, if he's treated correctly, if he is taken to the cardiologist. As you all know, there's a systematic problem with medical negligence in the Bahraini prison, and so this is a concern we've raised to the Danes, and we've, through partners in Brussels, has also raised with the European Union. So hopefully he is seen by a cardiologist. It should be said that right now, according to Bahraini authorities, Al-Khawaja's condition is stable, but it's also important for the family to stress that Al-Khawaja's heart issues must be considered an urgent matter by all relevant authorities. And we have asked the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs to work together with the Bahraini authorities to ensure medical evacuation to Denmark. This is something that, to be frank with you in this forum, it's not something that we are voting on. That's something that we believe might happen, but it's important to say that in the situation of Al-Khawaja's health situation, it's important to continue, stressing that his situation is urgent. On top of this, it should also be mentioned that a couple of weeks ago, a doctor confirmed that Al-Khawaja has glaucoma, which could lead to blindness if not treated adequately. And of course, taking the history of medical negligence, that is also something that we are concerned about. On an advocacy side, we continue having a somewhat constructive dialogue with the Danish Foreign Ministry and Danish parliamentarians. We were especially happy to see the Danish delegation calling for Al-Khawaja's release publicly during the IPU assembly in Manama. And we strongly reiterate that the Danish Foreign Minister, Mr. Lars Løkke, must do the same. So that is call publicly on the release of Al-Khawaja and all other political prisoners in Bahrain. This is something that a Danish foreign minister hasn't publicly and directly raised the case of Al-Khawaja since 2012. So that's over 10 years now, where the Danish ministry has raised the case in UN and EU forums, but we haven't seen a direct and public call for Al-Khawaja's release from a senior minister. So that's something that we are pressing for on all possible all possible channels. Regarding campaigning, we continue having good collaborations with organizations all over the world, and we thank you in helping raising the awareness on Abdulhadi Al-Khawaja's case, and of course on the general situation in Bahrain. On SoMe or social media, you can follow the hashtag free Al-Khawaja, and we thank you for liking and reposting, and our social media team. We have a small team trying on focusing on social media, tries also to do everything we can to kind of build up a stronger presence on social media not only focusing on Al-Khawaj's case, but the situation in Bahrain generally. So thank you for the chance for giving this brief oral intervention on behalf of the family. I thank you for your support, courage, and yeah, we look forward to working closely together in the future. Thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you so much for your statement, for explaining your work, and for advocating for the campaign for the release of Al-Khawaja. Wishing you lots of success in the future and hope that the campaign will see nothing else but success, hopefully. Thank you to all of the speakers, all of you who have raised many crucial points, have talked about the issue of human rights violations in Bahrain in all details, have very much elaborated on all the important aspects and elaborated your personal experiences and work. So now we have unfortunately almost reached the end. So I would like to give the opportunity to all of the speakers, but also people who are currently in this oral session and have been listening to all the speakers to either raise some questions or comment on specific aspects one of the speakers has raised or talked about during the meeting. So if anyone wants to intervene or say something before we're going to end this panel, yeah, he or she can just open his or her mic and just start talking or raising his or her respective points.
If I might just pop in for a moment.
Sure.
I mean, one of the things we can do is we can have the Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee discuss the situation in Bahrain. We can actually call in the Bahrainis to answer questions. And if my chairman is willing to do that, then I will come back to this group to provide the questions that need answering. And usually what happens is the representative of Bahrain will be in London and would be invited to either Zoom in or come to Dublin. But the meeting would be held in public, and this is really important because I would make the web address of the meeting public so as you could watch. You can't comment, but you can watch, and from there the story it can be built. So I give you that guarantee this evening that that request will go in when Parliament sits next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for raising this point at the end. I think very helpful for all the people who are currently present. Anyone who wants to speak can just intervene, but I think Ibrahim Damastani, I think I see you have raised your hand. I'm not sure if yes. Please open your mic and feel free to speak.
Ibrahim, so unmute. Ibrahim, تسمع?
Seems that he cannot speak.
لا هو من صوبه يرفع الميوت فقط. Remove the mute, Ibrahim. Please make it unmute. You are mute, Ibrahim. Ibrahim, you are mute. Just yes, you are mute.
ما يبغى يتكلم يتظاهر. ما يقدر. يمكن حاول يوسف، يمكن انت مانع عنه.
لا انا مو مانع عنه، الكل عادي. All of them they can speak.
انت ما تبغى تتكلم؟ خلينا نتكلم وياه. ما تبغى تتكلم؟ تبغى تتكلم؟
No, thank you.
يبغى يتكلم بس مو قادر يشيل الميوت. مو قادر. نسمع. You can hear us but we cannot hear you. Yes, حاول بس شي دقة صغيرة لأن راح شوي ثاني وراح الصوت. ضغط مرة ثانية بعد. عنده مشكلة he has a problem with his unmuting.
Yes, I see. Maybe if someone else wants to talk, so we are not waiting all the time, then anyone can talk, and then we see. I think now he unmuted. No, he's still muted. So anyone else, if she wants to raise a point, can do this, and then maybe we can see if it's going to work for him or not.
Well, I think Senator can do a good work through his position in Ireland. We have known the Irish to be proactive for the past 12 years. They have always been at the forefront of a human rights defense, especially in Bahrain. So we are grateful to you, but also if you can encourage the others in your party and who may be able, for example, to sign a petition, to sign a statement. These are all positive things. And also by writing to the government, you will be able to probably influence somehow the position and the policy of the government towards Bahrain. But as for Human Rights Watch, I hope they will do something to reprimand the IPU on their silence and unforgivable silence. They cannot just remain silent after your position, your visas have been revoked. Now, Ibrahim Durustani can speak.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum jami'an. First of all, thank you for this wonderful event. I think the participation of the senator and our friends from Human Rights Watch add value to this communication and discussion. Just I would like to say that, can you hear me?
Hey.
Okay. My name is Ibrahim Durustani, and I am one of the victims of Khalifa regime. I was in prison from 2011 till 2015 because we treated injured protesters. I was violated and I was tortured. I got a fracture, displaced a fracture in my back. Until now, I am suffering. Just what I would like to say, that since I was in a prison, myself and families of the prisoners, families of the martyrs, we were following the event in Human Rights Council and some statement raised from different human rights organizations, some political figures, some parliamentarians, some question raised to the ministers. But since that day, till I released from prison, I was attending also the Human Rights Council and attended so many meetings. We did a lot of advocacy, but still we didn't see any effect of this advocacy in stopping the regime from violating the people. Still, they are violating the people rights in receiving their treatment. And maybe Ali al-Mushayma, he mentioned about Mr. Hassan al-Mushayma, Dr. Abdul Jarir al-Singhis, Abdul Khadi al-Khawaja, and other prisoners who between time to time, they send messages, voice messages from inside the prison. But still the international community couldn't keep single pressure on the regime to stop this violation. My question is to the senator, what else that our political leaders, our political parties, human rights organization can do with the international community and to approve for them, like other countries in Ukraine, in Yemen, in Syria, and other, to approve for them to keep some pressure on the regime to stop all these violations, because the people still they are coming out to the street, still the people struggling, still the people fighting from inside the prison. They send their messages. The families, they come out to the street, fighting, raising all these demands, and the international community still cannot help those people. Thanks to all human rights organizations, human rights defenders, and raising some statement. This thanks. It's made our day in a prison. But finally, when we come to the outcome of these statements, we still, our people, they cannot leave the cell only for 1 hour. 23 hours they are inside the cell. So all their rights violated till this day. How can our political leaders, our political parties can do more, from your experience, Mr. Senator, to help the people in Bahrain and to keep real pressure on the regime? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I think this was a great last statement that kind of summarized all what everything that the speakers also have said before. Also, thank you for drawing attention to your own story. I think it's really, painful to hear this, but unfortunately, this is the current political reality in Bahrain. So since we have now exceeded a bit more than 1 hour, like it was initially planned, I would like to thank you everyone so much. Thank you, all of you, to all the speakers, everyone who had the time to participate in this session, in this panel, and to everyone who, raised the issue of human rights violations in Bahrain and mentioned all the important aspects, has talked about his or her personal work and from his or her also organizations. We had members from Human Rights Watch, we have Irish politician with us, we have someone from the campaign for the release of Abdelhadi al-Khawaji, we have political activists like Ali Mushayman's Saeed Shihabi. So thank you, all of you, again, for participating and for this really fruitful session. And I would like now to officially close this session. And again, very much appreciated. And lastly, thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Lara.
Thank you, Lara.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. It has been a wonderful time together.
Bye-bye. Wonderful
Thank
event.
you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.